Welcome back, everybody. Ready to dive into some research designs?
Oh, absolutely.
Today, we're tackling two big ones, correlational and causal comparative research designs.
These are everywhere.
Yeah.
You see them all the time.
And they're super useful in fields like psychology and education.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're going to break down how these designs work.
Okay.
And more importantly, how to critically evaluate
Right.
any research findings you come across.
Mhm.
You know, those flashy headlines you
Yeah.
see everywhere.
Exactly.
Our trusty guide for this deep dive
Okay.
is a classic research methods PDF that's used in a lot of university-level courses.
Perfect.
So let's jump right in with correlational research.
Okay.
This type of research is all about exploring relationships between variables.
Right.
But here's the catch: without manipulating them.
Okay.
So no experiments.
Gotcha.
It's more like just observing patterns in the wild.
Yeah.
So think of it like,
Either.
does watching violent movies actually relate to aggressive behavior? Ah, interesting.
Or is there a link between income level and happiness?
Yeah, you see those kinds of studies all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, how does this correlational research actually help us understand these natural associations?
Well, it's kind of like detective work. You
Yeah.
know, we're looking for clues to see if two things are related,
Okay.
but it doesn't prove cause and effect. That's the key here.
So it doesn't prove it, but it gives us a hint.
Exactly. It's like a starting point.
Okay, so it points us in the right direction.
Right.
Now, how do we actually measure these relationships?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where the correlation coefficient comes in.
Ah, yeah.
It gives us a number that tells us the strength and direction of the relationship.
And this number can be positive or negative.
Exactly. So positive correlation, like say 0.7,
Okay.
means that as one thing goes up, the other tends to go up too.
Mm-hmm.
So think like years of education and income level.
Yeah, that makes sense. The more education you have, the higher your potential income.
Yeah, and a negative correlation would be like negative 0.6.
Okay.
This means as one thing goes up, the other tends to go down.
Right.
Like maybe think about available free time and stress levels.
Yeah, so less free time, more stress.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
And the closer that correlation coefficient is to 1, whether it's positive or negative,
Yep.
the stronger the relationship.
Right. But even a strong correlation doesn't necessarily mean one thing causes the other, right?
This is where it gets really tricky.
Yes. It's important to remember that correlation does not equal causation.
Just because two things are related
Yeah.
doesn't mean one causes the other.
Right. There could be other factors at play.
Like what kind of other factors could be lurking behind the scenes?
Well, think about it like this.
Mm.
You see a headline that says, ice cream sales linked to crime increase.
Whoa, hold on. Does that mean ice cream is causing people to commit crimes?
Probably not. It's more likely that a third variable is influencing both.
Okay, so like what?
Like hot weather.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. During the summer, people
Mhm.
eat more ice cream.
And they're also out and about more often.
Right. So more opportunities for crime.
Exactly. So just because two things are correlated doesn't mean one is causing the other.
Okay, so how can we avoid falling into this trap? How can we be smarter about interpreting these correlations?
It's all about critical thinking. Ask yourself,
Yeah.
are there other possible explanations?
Yeah.
Could there be another variable affecting both?
Okay.
And it's always good to look for other studies.
Yeah.
See if they support or contradict these findings.
So basically, just because you see a correlation doesn't
Yeah.
mean you should jump to conclusions.
Exactly.
You got to dig deeper.
Right. Look at the whole picture.
Now, what if we're not just looking at two variables?
Okay.
What if we want to see how multiple factors are related?
Like a more complex relationship?
Yeah, imagine trying to understand the relationship between academic achievement, study habits, stress levels, AD, economic background.
That's a whole lot of variables.
It is. So how do researchers handle that kind of complexity?
That's where multiple correlations come into play.
Oh, okay.
It's like looking at a web of interconnected factors.
So it's not just a straight line between 2 points anymore.
No, it's more like a tangled web.
And how do they untangle that web?
They use some pretty advanced statistical techniques to try to isolate the influence of each variable.
So they're teasing apart the different threads?
Exactly.
But even with all these fancy stats, you
Yeah.
still got to remember that correlation does not equal causation.
It's like the golden rule of research.
Right. So to sum up this section on correlational research,
Mhm.
it's a really powerful tool for spotting potential relationships,
Right.
especially when we can't manipulate the variables we're interested in.
Yeah. You're right.
Think about things like personality traits or long-term health outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just assign those to people in an experiment.
Exactly. It would be unethical
Exactly.
and sometimes impossible.
So correlational research lets us study those things in a more realistic setting.
Right. But we have to be really careful about jumping to conclusions.
Absolutely.
Correlation gives us clues, but it's not the whole story.
It's like a piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
not the whole picture.
Okay, so we've talked about correlational research, where we're just looking for links between things.
Right, just observing.
But now let's shift gears a bit
Okay.
to another research design that tries to get a little closer to understanding cause and effect.
Ooh, getting closer to that causality.
Exactly. And this is called causal-comparative research.
Okay, so how's that different from correlational?
Well, instead of just looking for relationships, causal-comparative research compares groups
Okay.
that already differ on some characteristic.
So like pre-existing groups.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, imagine we're comparing
Okay.
the academic performance of students who went to private school
Okay.
versus those who went to public school.
Right, so we're not randomly assigning them.
Nope, these are groups that already exist.
Or maybe we're looking at health outcomes
Okay.
for people living in urban areas versus rural areas.
Interesting. So we're looking at real-world differences that are already there.
Exactly. And in these cases, we can't just manipulate the variables.
Right. You can't just assign someone to live in a city or a rural area.
Yeah, it wouldn't be ethical or even practical. But causal comparative research lets us explore these differences to see if they're connected to other outcomes.
So we're still looking for connections, but between groups.
Right. But here's the key. We're not controlling the cause.
We're just observing the effect.
Exactly. So how do we actually know if the differences we observe are meaningful?
Well, that's where the statistics come in.
The trusty stats.
Researchers use statistical tests to see if those differences between groups are statistically significant.
So basically, are they likely due to chance, or is there something more going on?
Exactly.
Now, I imagine there are still some challenges
So there are always challenges.
when interpreting these findings.
For sure.
What are some of the big ones?
One of the biggest is confounding variables.
Those sneaky variables.
They can really mess things up, you know?
So these are other factors that could be influencing the results.
Yeah, and they might differ between the groups we're comparing.
So it makes it hard to tell what's really causing the observed differences.
Right, like in that school example we talked about. Maybe private schools attract students from wealthier families,
Okay.
and that could be a confounding variable.
Because socioeconomic status could play a role in academic performance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So researchers try to control for these confounding variables.
Okay.
But it's not always easy, you know? It's like trying to solve a puzzle with some pieces missing.
So it's not a perfect system.
No research design is perfect.
So even with causal comparative research,
Yeah.
we still have to be cautious about jumping to conclusions about cause and effect.
Right. It gives us clues, but it doesn't give us the whole picture.
Like another piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. It's like building a case, you know? You need multiple pieces of evidence to really support a causal claim.
So we're gathering evidence,
Yeah.
but we're not drawing definitive conclusions.
Right. It points us in the right direction, but we need more.
Now, to really nail down cause and effect, we often need to move towards a true experimental design.
The gold standard.
Exactly, where we can actually manipulate the variable we think is the cause.
And randomly assign participants to different conditions.
Yes. That level of control really helps rule out those confounding variables.
Right, because in an experiment, we're creating the groups ourselves.
So we can be more confident
Yeah.
that the differences we see are actually due to the manipulation.
Because we're building the puzzle ourselves, so we know all the pieces fit together in a way that makes sense.
I like that analogy. But even with experimental designs, there are still limitations.
Of course, there are always limitations.
It's important to remember that no research design is perfect.
Right, they all have their strengths and weaknesses.
So it sounds like the key takeaway here is that we need to understand the different approaches to research
Absolutely.
so we can interpret the findings appropriately.
That's the whole point, you know?
We can't just blindly accept everything we read.
No, we got to be critical thinkers.
Because research is a process.
Yeah, it's ongoing.
And no single study gives us all the answers.
It's like building a wall brick by brick.
I like that.
Each study adds another brick to our understanding.
And by understanding the methods used, we can weigh the evidence more effectively.
And make better decisions based on that evidence.
So we've explored these two research designs, correlational and causal comparative, but how do we actually use this knowledge, in everyday life?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
We're all consumers of research, whether we realize it or not.
That's true.
Every time you read a news article about a new health study or see an ad claiming a product will boost your productivity,
Yeah.
you're encountering research findings.
And now we have the tools to start asking those critical questions.
Right.
Like, what kind of study was this based on?
Exactly.
What were the limitations?
Were there any confounding variables?
Yeah, those sneaky variables.
That might skew the results, you know.
So it's like we're becoming research detectives.
I like that.
We're not just taking things at face value anymore.
Right. We're digging deeper.
Like, imagine you see a headline that says, "Study shows video games improve problem-solving skills."
Oh, that's a good one.
Sounds pretty exciting, right?
Yeah.
But before we ditch all the board games and stock up on controllers,
Hold on.
let's think critically.
Okay.
Was this a correlational study that just found a link between video game playing and problem solving?
Right.
Or was it a causal comparative design?
Yeah. Did they actually compare groups of gamers and non-gamers?
And even then, were there other factors at play?
You got it.
Maybe gamers tend to be younger and already have better tech skills.
Which could influence their problem-solving abilities.
So it's like we're looking for clues to
Well,
see how much we can trust the findings.
and sometimes those clues are hidden in the language.
Oh, like what?
If you see words like linked to or associated with,
Okay.
that's often a sign it's correlational.
So we need to be cautious about cause and effect?
Exactly. But if they're making big claims about one thing causing another, we should be even more skeptical.
And look for strong evidence.
Because extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
So understanding these research designs doesn't mean rejecting all research.
No, not at all.
It's about being more informed,
Right.
asking the right questions,
It's about being an active participant in the research process.
instead of just passively absorbing information.
Exactly.
And that's what empowers us to be more critical thinkers.
Not just in the context of research.
But in all areas of our lives.
You got it. It's about looking beyond the surface, recognizing that the world is complex.
And not everything is as simple as it seems. So as you go forth and encounter all those fascinating research findings, remember the tools we've explored today.
Okay.
Ask those critical questions.
Look for those subtle clues.
And don't be afraid to dive deeper.
Into the methods behind the headlines.
Because ultimately it's about understanding the world a little bit better.
One study at a time.
And that's what makes this journey of learning so exciting.
Absolutely. There's always something new to discover.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And until next time, keep those critical thinking caps on.
And keep exploring.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content like this. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community for more insights into psychology and personal development. Let's grow and learn together. See you in the next video.